The legal case against Sean Combs, widely known as Diddy, has captured widespread attention due to its serious allegations and high-profile nature. The prosecution accuses Diddy of orchestrating a criminal enterprise through his Bad Boy Records company, alleging that he engaged in racketeering, sex trafficking, and violations of the Mann Act. These charges paint a picture of a sophisticated operation that leveraged Diddy's wealth, influence, and corporate infrastructure to facilitate illegal activities. However, the defense has adopted a strikingly concise strategy, announcing that they will need only 1 or 2 days to present their case once they take over from the prosecution. This is a significant departure from their initial plan of a 2-week defense, signaling a high degree of confidence in their position. In legal terms, this brevity does not necessarily indicate an expectation of outright victory, but rather a belief that the prosecution has failed to meet its burden of proof, particularly in establishing the elements of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense's approach suggests they are capitalizing on perceived weaknesses in the prosecution's evidence, aiming to create reasonable doubt rather than constructing an extensive counter-narrative. The prosecution's case centers on the claim that Diddy operated a criminal enterprise under the guise of Bad Boy Records, using the company's resources and employees to facilitate a range of illegal activities. Central to their argument is the allegation of racketeering, prosecuted under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, commonly known as RICO. To secure a conviction on this charge, the prosecution must demonstrate a pattern of criminal activity conducted through an enterprise, in this case, Bad Boy Records. They allege that Diddy coordinated elaborate sexual events referred to as freak-offs, which involve drugs, sex workers, and coercive behavior. According to the prosecution, these events were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader organized operation in which Diddy's employees played key roles, such as procuring drugs and arranging logistics. The prosecution contends that these activities constitute a criminal enterprise, with Bad Boy Records serving as a front for Diddy's illicit operations. Another critical component of the prosecution's case is the charge of sex trafficking, particularly involving individuals referred to as Cassie and Jane. The prosecution alleges that Diddy engaged in non-consensual activities using force, coercion, or fraud to exploit these individuals. To support this claim, they have presented evidence suggesting that Diddy's actions went beyond consensual relationships, instead involving manipulation or intimidation. Additionally, the prosecution has introduced evidence of military-grade weapons found at Diddy's residence, where his children also reside. This discovery is intended to underscore the dangerous nature of the alleged criminal enterprise, suggesting that Diddy's operations pose significant risks beyond mere personal misconduct. The presence of such weapons is a powerful piece of evidence, as it aligns with the prosecution's narrative of a sophisticated and potentially violent criminal operation. The Mann Act charge represents one of the prosecution's strongest claims. This federal law prohibits transporting individuals across state lines for prostitution or other immoral purposes. The prosecution alleges that Diddy paid sex workers, including male escorts, to cross state lines to participate in the freak-offs, a violation that carries significant penalties, including the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence. Unlike the racketeering and sex trafficking charges, which require proof of intent, coercion, or a pattern of criminal activity, the Mann Act has a lower legal threshold. The prosecution claims to have documented evidence such as financial transactions, communications, or witness testimony that supports this charge. This evidence could include bank records showing payments to individuals, travel itineraries, or messages coordinating interstate travel for prostitution. The clarity of the Mann Act's requirements and the strength of the prosecution's evidence make this charge particularly challenging for the defense to refute. The defense's strategy is notably streamlined, focusing on creating reasonable doubt rather than presenting a comprehensive alternative narrative. They argue that the prosecution has not met its burden of proving that Diddy's actions constituted a criminal enterprise. Instead, they characterize the alleged crimes as disorganized, portraying Diddy as an individual who may have used his wealth and influence in a haphazard, non-systematic manner rather than as the head of a structured criminal organization. This distinction is critical for the racketeering charge, as RICO requires evidence of an ongoing organized enterprise, not merely isolated criminal acts. By framing Diddy's actions as disorganized, the defense seeks to undermine the prosecution's narrative of a coordinated criminal network, suggesting that the activities were more akin to personal indulgences than a sophisticated operation. On the sex trafficking allegations, the defense contends that any interactions with individuals like Cassie and Jane were consensual. They argue that the prosecution has failed to demonstrate force, coercion, or fraud, which are essential elements of a sex trafficking charge under federal law. By emphasizing consent, the defense aims to reframe the narrative, suggesting that the relationships or encounters were voluntary and not criminal in nature. This argument hinges on the jury's perception of the evidence and whether the prosecution can convincingly prove non-consensual conduct. The defense's approach is to challenge the credibility and sufficiency of the prosecution's evidence, rather than calling numerous witnesses to rehabilitate Diddy's public image or testify to positive experiences at Bad Boy Records. This decision to limit their presentation to 1 or 2 days reflects their belief that the prosecution's case is sufficiently weak that an extensive defense is unnecessary. A pivotal moment in the trial came with the testimony of Brendan Paul, a former personal assistant to Diddy. Paul was arrested during a raid on Diddy's homes, with authorities alleging he served as a drug mule who facilitated the procurement of drugs for Diddy's activities, including the freak-offs. However, Paul's testimony, given under immunity, proved surprisingly favorable to the defense. He denied being a drug mule, stating that obtaining drugs for Diddy was a minor part of his duties over an 18-month period, limited to approximately 5 to 10 instances. More significantly, Paul testified that he observed Jane, one of the individuals allegedly involved in the freak-offs, before and after these events, and noted that she did not appear distressed. This observation directly undermines the prosecution's claim of coercion or harm, suggesting that Jane's participation was voluntary. Paul's testimony was so favorable to the defense that it raised questions about why the prosecution chose to call him as a witness, as his statements appeared to align more closely with the defense's narrative. Other assistants who testified also admitted to procuring drugs for Diddy, but the defense argues that these actions do not necessarily constitute a criminal enterprise. They contend that such activities are common in certain social circles, particularly among high-profile individuals with access to wealth and resources. By normalizing these behaviors within the context of Diddy's lifestyle, the defense seeks to challenge the prosecution's portrayal of a sophisticated criminal network. They argue that procuring drugs or arranging events does not inherently equate to organized crime, especially if the actions lack the structure and intent required for a RICO conviction. The defense's effective cross-examination of prosecution witnesses, including Paul, has been a cornerstone of their strategy, allowing them to highlight inconsistencies or alternative interpretations without needing to present an extensive case of their own. While the defense appears confident in challenging the racketeering and sex trafficking charges, the Mann Act violation presents a more formidable obstacle. The law's straightforward requirements, proof of payment, and interstate travel for prostitution make it difficult to refute, especially given the prosecution's claim of documented evidence. The defense may have limited options to counter this charge, as the legal threshold is lower than for racketeering or sex trafficking. The text suggests that the defense may have effectively conceded this point, recognizing the strength of the prosecution's evidence and the potential for a significant prison sentence if convicted. This strategic retreat on the Mann Act charge allows the defense to focus their efforts on dismantling the more complex racketeering and sex trafficking allegations, where they believe the prosecution's case is weaker. The defense's decision to present a case lasting only 1 or 2 days is a bold move that carries both risks and potential rewards. By truncating their presentation, they signal to the jury that they believe the prosecution's evidence is so lacking that an extensive defense is unnecessary. This approach can be effective if the jury perceives the prosecution's case as weak or if the defense's cross-examinations have successfully created doubt. However, it also risks appearing overly confident or dismissive, potentially alienating jurors who expect a more robust defense to counter such serious allegations. The defense's strategy is rooted in their assessment of the prosecution's performance, particularly during witness examinations. Through effective cross-examination, they have sought to expose inconsistencies, lack of direct evidence, or alternative interpretations of the events, such as Paul's testimony about Jane's lack of distress. The discovery of military-grade weapons at Diddy's residence adds a layer of complexity to the case. The prosecution uses this evidence to support their portrayal of a dangerous criminal operation, arguing that the presence of such weapons indicates a level of threat and organization consistent with a criminal enterprise. However, the defense may argue that the weapons do not directly tie to the specific charges or prove the existence of a coordinated criminal network. They could contend that the weapons were for personal security, given Diddy's high-profile status, rather than evidence of criminal intent. The jury's interpretation of this evidence will be critical, as it could sway their perception of Diddy's character and the nature of his operations. The case's outcome hinges on the jury's assessment of several key factors, including the credibility of witnesses, the strength of the prosecution's evidence, and the presence of reasonable doubt. The prosecution must prove each element of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt, a high standard that the defense believes has not been met, particularly on the racketeering and sex trafficking charges. The Mann Act charge, however, appears to be the prosecution's strongest, given the documented evidence and the law's clear criteria. The text references a mock jury from a documentary that split on some charges, suggesting that the real jury may also have mixed views. This indicates that the case could result in a partial conviction, with Diddy potentially found guilty on the Mann Act charge but acquitted on others, depending on how the jury weighs the evidence. The timeline for the trial suggests a rapid resolution, with the defense's abbreviated presentation potentially leading to a verdict as early as the following week. However, the complexity of the charges and the volume of evidence may lead to prolonged jury deliberations. The jury will need to consider whether the prosecution has proven force, coercion, or a pattern of criminal activity, particularly for the racketeering and sex trafficking charges. The Mann Act charge, with its lower threshold, may be easier for the prosecution to secure, but the broader narrative of a criminal enterprise will require careful scrutiny of witness testimony, financial records, and other evidence. The case has garnered significant public attention, fueled by sensational details such as the discovery of Astroglide lube, baby oil, and other items during raids on Diddy's properties. These details have become fodder for public commentary and jokes, but they also highlight the challenges of separating salacious elements from the substantive legal issues. The more serious allegations, such as the presence of military-grade weapons and the involvement of employees in alleged criminal activities, underscore the gravity of the charges. The prosecution's framing of Diddy as the head of a criminal enterprise taps into broader societal concerns about power, influence, and accountability in the entertainment industry. The case raises questions about how far federal law enforcement should go in policing personal conduct, particularly when allegations involve high-profile figures with significant resources. The defense's argument that some of the prosecution's claims amount to bedroom policing challenges the application of federal laws like RICO and the Mann Act to Diddy's actions. While the Mann Act clearly criminalizes transporting individuals across state lines for prostitution, the racketeering and sex trafficking charges require a more nuanced analysis of intent, coercion, and organizational structure. The defense's suggestion that Diddy's actions were disorganized and consensual invites the jury to consider whether the prosecution has overreached in characterizing his behavior as a criminal enterprise. This argument resonates with broader debates about the boundaries of law enforcement in personal and professional spheres, particularly in cases involving wealth and fame. The trial's outcome will have significant implications for Diddy's future, both legally and professionally. A conviction on the Mann Act charge could result in a substantial prison sentence, while a racketeering conviction would carry even broader consequences, potentially implicating Diddy's business empire. An acquittal, on the other hand, could reinforce the defense's narrative that the prosecution overstepped in pursuing the case. Beyond Diddy's personal fate, the case may influence public perceptions of accountability in the entertainment industry, particularly regarding allegations of exploitation and abuse of power. The high-profile nature of the trial ensures that its resolution will be closely watched, with potential ripple effects for how similar cases are prosecuted in the future. The interplay of legal strategies in this case highlights the complexities of prosecuting high-profile individuals for alleged crimes that blend personal conduct with professional operations. The prosecution's challenge is to prove that Diddy's actions cross the line from personal indulgences to organized criminal activity, while the defense seeks to dismantle this narrative by emphasizing consent, disorganization, and reasonable doubt. The testimony of witnesses like Brendan Paul, combined with physical evidence like the weapons and financial records, will play a critical role in shaping the jury's decision. As the trial nears its conclusion, the legal teams, the jury, and the public await a resolution that could redefine accountability in the entertainment world. And that wraps up our deep dive into the Diddy case, where legal strategies and high-stakes allegations are keeping us all on the edge of our seats. Stay tuned for more updates as this story unfolds, and don't forget to subscribe to Trend Stars for the latest news and insights. Hit that like button, share with your friends, and we'll see you in the next video. Keep shining, Trend Stars.